Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. Welcome back to the Kitchen Table series, our longest running content series here on our channel. This is our 61st installment. So this is deck tech number 61, and it is Golgari Spiders. What's up, MTG BC, baby? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here we are again with another installment of the Kitchen Table series. We are up to our 61st deck today. It is Golgari Spiders, and as usually is customary here at the Kitchen Table series, we're going to begin with the mana base. What isn't usually customary is an imbalanced mana base, but for the purposes of this deck colors here, we are going to slant a little bit more towards green than we are black. So let's begin with our basic lands. You're going to see 6 basic swamps included in the 60 of this deck. 6 basic swamps. You're going to see 10 basic forests to make up 16 of the 20 lands in this build. And the only other playset of lands we're going to include are a non-basic of Woodland Cemetery. This is our Golgari check land. It's going to come down into play untapped as long as we control a swamp or a forest. 4 copies of that, and as you can see, we are slanting more heavily towards green than black because green is a lot more represented in the Spider tribe than Golgari or than black is. However, we're still going to roll with the Golgari colors in this deck just for the purposes of bringing out the best of what the Spiders can do. Now, we said this was the introduction to the mana base. Those are the lands. Here come your mana rocks. Of course, we're at the kitchen table, and most kitchen table decks should have a soul ring. And we're playing Golgari, so we're playing 2 colors. So let's include a full play set of Golgari Signets. This is going to come down for a mana cost of 2. We're going to pay 1 mana, turn Golgari Signet sideways to give us a black or green mana. 4 copies of Golgari Signet. And the last piece of mana ramp we are going to include in this deck, it is a copy of Growing Rites of Itlimoc. It is an enchantment for 2 and a green mana, and when it ETBs, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, we reveal a creature card, which, for the purposes of this deck, will be a spider. We put that into our hand, and then the rest in the bottom of our library in any order. At the beginning of our end step, if we control 4 or more creatures, again, for the purposes of this deck, if we control 4 or more spiders, and we will, then we transform Growing Rites of Itlimoc into, if you can even imagine this, a better version of Gaia's Cradle. We have Itlimoc, Cradle of the Sun. It turns sideways for a green mana. It also turns sideways for 1 green mana for each creature we control. This is better than the Gaia's Cradle because how many times, if you're fortunate enough to have a Gaia's Cradle, how many times have you been in a game and had that land under your control with no creatures on your side of the battlefield? It kind of hurts to have a land that powerful and not be able to activate it. However, Itlimoc, Cradle of Growth, thank you for being in this Golgari Spiders deck. All right, so before we get into our spider creature spells, let's spend some time talking about our disruption, talking about some removal, and talk about some tokens that we're going to make. We have included a copy of Beast Within because it can just destroy any permanent, and it gifts the controller of that permanent with a 3/3 green beast creature token. We don't care about a token. We really don't. Not one that's just 3/3, particularly when we have the ability at instant speed to off any permanent we so choose, as long as it doesn't have protection or indestructible or anything like that. All right, so now let's talk about a little bit of disruption, and this is going right to the face of our opponents, and that is going to be Arachnogenesis. It is an instant for 2 and a green mana. We create X, 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach and put them onto the battlefield, of course, where X is the number of creatures attacking us. We prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. It seems very reasonable to think that none of your opponents are going to be sitting down with a spider deck, outside perhaps of maybe a shapeshifter with changeling deck. This way, we can just sit back, let a swarm of tokens come our way, cast Arachnogenesis, fog those creatures, and then we can double, triple, quadruple block any of the problematic tokens or creatures we want right off of the battlefield. 3 copies of Arachnogenesis. Next up, jumping up in mana value from our 3 spot to our 5 spot, we're going to play with a full play set of Spider Spawning. At sorcery speed, we pay 4 and a green, and we create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature card in our graveyard, and our spiders will most likely be hitting that yard early and often. This gives us the additional benefit of casting it from our graveyard because of its flashback ability. 6 and a black, and we may cast this card from our graveyard and then exile it. So now we're seeing the first instance of a splash of black in this Golgari Spider deck. 4 copies of Spider Spawning. All right, now we're going to run down 4 cards that are one-ofs in this deck, some of which are looking at win conditions, and one that's looking at a way in which to wipe the board if needed. First, we're going to take a look at Overrun, all the way back from the days of Tempest. Sorcery speed, 2 triple green. Creatures we control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. A great way to crack back against our opponents. If one of them sends an army our way and we cast Arachnogenesis, next turn we untap, we sink 5 mana into this sorcery, and we overrun them right off of the table. 1 copy of Overrun. Next up, and another card that we can look at as a potential win condition, 1 copy of Living Death. We all know what this wonderful sorcery can do. 3 and double black at sorcery speed. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, and then sacrifices all creatures they control, and then put onto the battlefield all creatures that were exiled this way. Because of the way in which this deck is built and the reasonable expectation that many of our spiders will be hitting the yard, we most likely should have the upper hand in casting a Living Death. Just make sure you know what's in your opponent's graveyards. Another potential win condition card included in this deck is Genesis Wave. Sorcery speed, X and triple green. We reveal the top X cards of our library, and we may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. The only drawback, cards revealed this way that do not go onto the battlefield, they go into the graveyard instead. So we should look to Genesis Wave as a potential last of, particularly if we are looking to get a Living Death or an Arachnogenesis to really help turn the tides at the table. And the last one-of card in this segment of the deck tech, we're looking at this for mass removal, and it's going to be Gaze of Granite. Sorcery speed, 2 black, 1 green, and X. We destroy each non-land permanent with CMC X or less. This is, again, a kill switch if needed, and let's be honest, the Spider Tribe is not overflowing with uber powerful renditions, so we have to make sure that we include some ways in which to reset the board, and if we have to look to Gaze of Granite to do so, that's why there's a 1 copy of it in this deck. All right, so we rolled out our lands, we rolled out our mana rocks and ramp, some disruption, some removal, some win conditions. Now let's talk about the spiders that we are including in this deck. We're going to play with some of 3 copies. We're going to play with some that are 4. We're going to be all over the place as it comes to these creatures. So let's begin with a 3 copies of Deadly Recluse. Probably the best first spider that we can cast in this deck. It's only 1 and a green. It is only a 1/2, but it does have reach and death touch. This is a great deterrent for our opponents, particularly if they're thinking about sending in some kind of creature. We can always look to trade up by using our reach, death touching all-day chump blocker to get rid of a creature on the battlefield that's much more imposing than our little 1/2. 3 copies of Deadly Recluse. Another creature that we're playing 3 copies of is going to be Juvenile Gloom Widow. It is 2 green for 1/3. It also has reach. You're pretty much going to see that as a theme throughout this Spider deck. Not having Death Touch, however, we have Wither instead, and if you're unfamiliar with the Wither mechanic that originated from Shadowmoor, this creature will deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So again, if there's any opponents that want to just send multiple creatures our way, one of which would just usually get blocked by a creature like Juvenile Gloom Widow with a 1/3 and still survive, well, guess what? Damage is not going to wear off during the cleanup step. Those are going to be -1/-1 counters, and that's a lot harder to get off. 3 copies of Juvenile Gloom Widow. Next up, we're going to move up to a full playset of our first Golgari Spider, and that's going to be Nyx Weaver. 2/3 with reach for 1 and Golgari colors. At the beginning of our upkeep, we put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard. We can pay 1 in Golgari colors to exile Nyx Weaver, and then we can return a card from our graveyard to our hand. Very powerful ability, particularly because we can do that at instant speed. We can wait till end of turn and get one of our most important cards from our graveyard right back into our hand. 4 copies of Nyx Weaver. All right, moving on up, staying with Golgari, but moving from a play set down to just 2 copies. We're going to play with Rot Widow Pack, 2/4 with reach, 2 and Golgari colors. We can pay 3 in Golgari colors to exile a creature card from our graveyard, and we can create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. Then each opponent loses 1 life for each spider we control. As you see from the number of spiders we can cast, in addition to the number of spells we have that can create spider tokens, we can look at Rot Widow Pack as one of our win conditions in this deck. 2 copies of this 4-drop. All right, next up, we're just going to play with a single copy of Penumbra Spider. 2/4 with reach for 2 and 2 green. When it dies, we create a 2/4 black spider creature token, and we put that baby right onto the battlefield. So this kind of gives us 2 creatures in 1 for the investment of 4 mana. I will admit, if this creature were more readily available in my collection, it may force out a couple of the other spiders we've already talked about. However, because of the balance and the curve that we're looking to achieve with the spells in this deck, sometimes that's easier said than done. But for right now, we got 1 copy of Penumbra Spider. Great synergy when we're talking about bringing it back with Nyx Weaver. All right, next up, and a new addition to the Spider deck, it's a full playset, and that's going to be a Rasta of the Endless Web. 3/5 legendary enchantment spider with reach for 2 and 2 green mana. Yes, this is an enchantment creature, so it does open itself up to additional vulnerability in the realm of spot removal, because anything that says destroy target enchantment, it could destroy a Rasta. However, we're going to benefit from that, because whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we are going to create a 1/2 spider creature token with reach. So even if we lose this to direct removal, we still come out on top as long as it's an instant or sorcery spell. Maybe we don't come out on top, but we do get something in its place. 4 copies of a Rasta of the Endless Web and its token making ability. All right, and the last 4-pack that we're going to talk about, if we're talking about a spider deck, if we're talking about Golgari Spiders, you know we're going to have to include the grand widow of them all, and that's going to be Ishkana Graph Widow. 3/5 spider with reach. It is a legendary for 4 and 1 green mana. It has the Delirium mechanic. When Ishkana ETBs, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in our graveyard, we create 3 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach and put those babies right onto the battlefield. Additionally, we can pay 6 and a black and have target opponent lose 1 life for each spider you control. How I do wish that that last ability was each opponent. Can you imagine the power of a spider deck like this if Ishkanah's last ability was each opponent? Oh, that would have been the stuff that dreams are made of. Unfortunately, we take the hand that we dealt, and Ishkanah is still a fantastically powerful addition in this Golgari Spider build. 4 copies of this legendary spider. All right, MTGBC. There you have it. Deck tech number 61, Golgari Spiders. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.